Live. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Good evening to people who are at home. I want to welcome you tonight to the second and more formal of our community input meetings or actually mostly community update meeting this evening regarding the situation with Mr. Smith with the allegations of lewd and lascivious actions that our children have been faced with and with really the challenges that we face as a community in addressing these issues and trying to decide how to move forward in a very complicated time. I want to announce also that we have Spanish language translation, so I'm going to take a moment to welcome our families who are speaking and listening in Spanish. Bienvenidos a todos los padres de niños de nuestro distrito. Esta noche tuvimos las personas que pueden traducir por ustedes y también vamos a hacer una otra cita donde los padres que hablan solamente español pueden tener un tipo de interacción que nosotros no podríamos hacer hoy. So again, as a superintendent, I really am very torn about how to bring you together in this room this evening. We have some pretty tragic and horrific situations that we're facing together. And, I hope this evening when you hear from the sheriff's department and you hear from our lawyer that what they will say will echo and reinforce what I attempted to say last week. I will again reiterate that I take my job as superintendent very, very seriously. Any of you who would ever see any of my background or history. And you can confirm it with any number of other police agencies, including the chief of police in Santa Rosa and Sonoma. I've been directly involved in these things. They're horrible. They're never good. And I've always held myself to a standard, whether it's in walking in your classrooms, observing instruction, or leading your school district, that my very own children are the very same children that you serve. I'm fearless about this. And I'm also, I think, fearless about protecting the rights of the victims. And my primary goal is that as we come together as a community, we recognize that there are children in our community who are healing. They need the opportunity and space to find their way forward. Those who've already come forward need the opportunity to heal. And those who haven't come forward yet need to know that you can hold two truths in your head at the same time. You can love someone and you can care deeply about them. And sometimes, and again, I cannot speak to whether or not the allegations are true or not, and you'll hear more about that this evening, but they may do things that are hurtful. And I, have to say that. Next slide. Also want to make sure that prior to the last meeting, I announced that we were not going to record it. I am now letting everybody know that what we are saying will be recorded and shared. So again, I ask that we not use the names of individuals, individual children, individual staff members. I believe we can use Mr. Smith's name, but again, this is not the context for addressing character or concerns. Next slide. I also want to make sure that you know that if you're listening from home and you have children in the room, please be sure that they're not able to listen as well. This is a sensitive topic. The content of this evening's conversations will be sensitive and they're not appropriate for children to hear. So again, also transparent that we're recording it and it will be available probably by the end of this week for people who can't listen right now because their children are in the room. Next slide. So just a quick overview of what our intentions are this evening. Well, I'll provide some introductions. Actually, I'll probably let people introduce themselves in the interest of time. We're going to have a team from N2 Action facilitating, and they will provide an outline for how to engage. Usually, this is through a tool called Slido. We do this because we want parity of voices, and we want to make sure that people at home have the opportunity to be heard as much as people in the audience. We are going to have our team from the Sheriff's Department provide information on the update of the status of the criminal investigation. This will be followed by Jaspreet Lokab of Dennis Waller. Now she's with Lozano Smith, coming to share with us virtually what the outline of the next steps for the districts are. And then we'll have our panel of experts, Michael and Kathleen, who do this for a living and have been involved in this investigation as by nature of the work they do. They will be sharing and discussing topics for discussing sensitive issues with your children. Please know that while they cannot say anything about specific situations, the information that they provide tonight is expert information about how to talk to your children. They cannot speak to specifics, but again, we have brought in forensic experts to provide you the advice and guidance to speak to your children. I can't emphasize that enough. They will not be able to speak to specifics, but they will provide you tools. And then finally, we'll share an initial overview of parent response resources, knowing that again, this is an ongoing conversation. The resources are ongoing. And we also, I should probably say from the beginning, not all questions that people asked this evening we will be able to answer. We had 44 questions in our last meeting. We're looking at them, trying to figure out how best to address them, but many of them are very difficult to address because of the nature of the investigation, which is both handled at the criminal level and at the administrative level for the district. And I will hand it over to our team from N2 Action, I believe.
Thank you. My name is Kiari Bolding. I'm the Deputy Director at N2 Action. I'm joined by Abraham Ballin, our Senior Program Manager. And some of you are familiar with us. We've done community engagement support in the past. And as Dr. Kaufman mentioned, we're using a tool called Slido, and you find it at Slido, SLIDO.com. And this is a tool, it's basically a question and answer tool that provides the equity and purity of voice that she mentioned. And because of the gravity and nature of the topic tonight, it's equally important that we use this exclusively to make sure that we're both addressing equitably the folks in the room and the folks online listening. And we also have translation, as was mentioned, but that we can address the number of questions that we may have. And one of the things we want to be transparent about for folks that have used this with us in the past is that if the questions that are entered into the system do reference name of staff or children, or the appropriate nature can't be read out loud, then those questions will not be read out loud. So I just want to be very transparent about that we're not reading them if those things are in the question itself. So we're going to do our best to address as many as we can tonight, given the hard stop timeline. But I also wanted to say that we usually have norms for our meetings. So students are at the center. I want to expand that to families and community as well tonight, and that we listen to each other with compassion and respect, and we hear each other out. So our norms are usually set at the same time as we go over the tool and how it's used. So I want to reiterate that. We're committed to, I guess, addressing as many as possible. But I also wanted to say, if you don't have internet access and can't access Slido.com, we have Rob and Sarah here. Rob's right there, Sarah's back there. They have forms that you can write your question. They will hand it to us and we will put it in the queue so we answer it in the order received. Thank you so much. And back to Dr. Kaufman.
And I want to just make a comment before. I am not going to sit at the table this evening. I'm not sitting at the table because I don't think it's my responsibility. I'm going to allow our experts to be sitting at the table, but also for me very personally, sitting between the two experts discussing the topic that was discussed last Friday or Thursday was very triggering, and I need to take care of myself as well. So while I take care of your kids, so I won't be sitting in the middle. So I will hand over. Next slide, Sid, please. Next slide. I want to introduce the team from the Sheriff's Department. We have, I'm kind of a first name basis person. So we have Hugh Baker, Laura Drago, and Heather White. I've been involved with Laura and Devin Gasparini since March 27th, and they're here to 28th maybe, to update you guys on the status of the investigation. Please note, we are offering 10 minutes for their presentation, and then or their discussion introduction, and then we'll provide 20 minutes to have them answer as many questions as they can, as appropriately as they can. So I will invite you all up here and I will get out of the middle.
Thank you, Dr. Kaufman. I'm Hugh Baker with the Sheriff's Office. Are we not on? Can you hear me? Okay. So I'm Hugh Baker with the Sheriff's Office. I've been with the Sheriff's Office for 35 years. I currently serve in the Detective Bureau in the Special Victims Unit, and I'll introduce Detective Heather White and Sergeant Lori Dargo. And we've all worked together for quite some time. Lori has a tremendous amount of experience in these type of investigations. Heather's been in our unit for a couple of years and is doing a tremendous job for us. I want to say at the outset that the way that the Sheriff's Office approaches these types of investigations is from a trauma-informed position. Okay, so everything that we do in our investigations, yes, we are collecting evidence, we are investigating crime, but at the same time, our primary concern is protecting the survivors of sexual assault and facilitating as best we can their journey to healing. And that's very important because obviously these types of crimes are difficult to recover from and to heal from. So if we're very clinical, for lack of a better term, that can be very difficult for the victims. So we greatly appreciate Dr. Grogan and the staff of the Jeanette Prandy Children's Center, the work that they do. They help us approach these from a trauma-informed point of view. As far as the status of the investigation, Dr. Kaufman asked me to address that specifically. Our investigation remains open. It is essentially paused at the moment as we are waiting for the death certificate for our suspect. I was asked not to refer to him by name, so I'll avoid that. Once we have that, my understanding from our chief deputy coroner is that is pending toxicology. The declaration of the manner and cause of death is pending toxicology. And that will be another 3 to 4 weeks before those results are back and we get that determination. Once we have the death certificate, we will officially close our investigation. With that said, I want to make sure that there's an understanding that if there are additional individuals that want to come forward and disclose, we don't refer to people involved in these cases that have been abused as victims. We refer to them as survivors, and that identity is very important to their recovery. So if there are additional survivors that want to come forward and that want to disclose to us, we want to take those disclosures from them, because sometimes that's an important part of the healing process for them to go officially on record. It's not for everyone, but sometimes it is. And if they want to come on record and they want to officially file a report and have that documented in the case, we want to make sure that we provide that opportunity. And we are working with the Jeanette Prandy Center to do that, although recording or logging the evidence of a forensic interview, it would not be our priority at that point, but we will likely follow the standard protocol as we do in every case. And again, that's for the benefit of those survivors as well as making sure that documentation is done in the proper format. Specific information about the case, I can't get into the specific details. One of the things that we've been asked, and it may come up in the Q&A, is, with what specificity can we describe allegations? And the answer to that is we can't. The reports involve juveniles, the investigation involves juveniles, and those documents are controlled. And I'm not a documents expert, but I've been told by our records management division manager that we cannot release that information to the public, and the reports cannot be released to the public. With that said, when the allegations first came to our knowledge, we immediately opened an investigation. Detective White and Sergeant Dargo were at the front of that. They handled the investigation through the point at which probable cause was developed to make an arrest, and the arrest was made. Subsequent to that, the very next day, Formal charges were filed by the district attorney. And then when we realized that the suspect had become deceased, at that point, we reached out to the district attorney's office and they had to formally appear in court and dismiss the charges. So that's not a lot of information, I know, but that is about the extent of what we can publicly share as far as the criminal investigation is concerned. Do either of you have anything to add before Q&A? One thing I do want to say publicly is that from the very beginning, the collaboration between the school site staff and administration and the district staff and administration with our investigation was phenomenal. And I'm not saying that, you know, fortuitously. In my 35 years of experience working here in Marin County, we have had schools that have cooperated very closely with us and helped us in every way possible with the common goal of providing a safe and secure environment for our children to grow and learn and thrive in the community. There have been better examples of that, and there have been not as good examples of that. This particular case was textbook in the way that we were notified, the timeliness of the notification, and we were just blessed to have an experienced special victims, Sergeant Dargo is an experienced special victims detective with many years of experience, and she's done many of these forensic interviews. Having her in the unit temporarily really benefited us and allowed us to expand that collaboration with the school district. So we're very happy, unhappy with the tragic results all the way around, but very happy with the professional and collaborative manner in which it was handled. So I think that's it before Q&A.
Thank you so much for the patience with the microphone. I also want to just clarify again that we're using Slido.com, the folks in the room. We also have 2 people walking around with actual forms in case you don't want to put it into Slido.com and write it, if that's your preference. I also want to say to the folks in the room and online, if you are using Slido.com, the first set of questions we filtered over in the order received are the ones directly relevant to the panel we have now. The ones that are specific to school staff and or counselors we're holding in the order received for that next section. So these are panel related questions. Number 1, if the police investigation will end, who will complete the investigation to confirm that there was no negligence at the school that allowed this to occur?
So we're criminal investigators. We're not in the business of conducting civil investigations. The school and Dr. Kaufman would have to specifically and the attorney address that. The administrative investigation, that's that side of it. And we are not involved in that process.
Okay, and this is piggybacking off of something I heard you say, but just reiterating the content you already said. Will the investigation continue? If so, please explain the goal and the next steps. If not, explain why not and how community will obtain closure, please.
So one of the things that I said to Dr. Kaufman early on in an email exchange is that the outcome in this particular case is both a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because the court process can be an arduous journey for a survivor. We live in a constitutional republic, and the primary job of the courts is to ensure the rights of the defendant. And while that is critically important, and I think we all support that very much, at the same time, that's very difficult for survivors to go through. It can cause a lot of emotions, much less children who are survivors. So on one hand, there's a blessing in the fact that they will not have to go through that. They will not have to go through that court process. They will not have to endure the additional trauma that could bring to them. It's a curse because closure may be difficult to find. may be difficult to find for them, and it may be difficult to find for the community. The facts of the case will not be aired out in the venue of the courts, and there will be no judicial determination at the end of guilt or innocence. And whether looking at the evidence, we would all agree with the verdict at the end or not, that won't happen in this case. So it's not a perfect world. There are upsides to it and downsides. And I hope I'm answering the question. The investigation continuing, we're comfortable leaving it open in order to hear additional disclosures. Again, if those individuals and their parents are comfortable with that and want to engage that process. So we will continue to receive those and document them appropriately. As far as the outcome of the investigation, there's no one, unless there's another suspect that we're unaware of, there's no one at this point to charge. So there is no point in conducting the investigation beyond hearing these disclosures and providing that venue and forum for the survivors.
In acknowledging something, I also heard you say, I'm going to ask this question again as well, and perhaps for staff to address it when we get to staff. In light of the allegations, are there any changes or proposed changes to district and school level policies or procedures regarding staff? I know you said you're criminal. From the criminal investigative side, the answer would be no. And then I would defer to school staff. Absolutely. Did the accused events occur at Strawberry Point Elementary on campus? I'm going to take that as a jurisdictional question and not specific to allegations. The specific crimes that we investigated were in fact alleged to have occurred on campus. Excellent. And this is just a comment related. A note of special thanks to the Strawberry Point school staff for the support they've been providing to the kids. We know these events have been hard for them too. Okay, next question. And this is school related, but it's on here. Does Mill Valley allow teachers to be alone with children in a room with no outside visibility? What policies are in place to make sure that children are safe? And again, we would defer to staff. Got you. I'm going to try to.
If it's okay, if I could say something about
excellent.
The school. I know Sergeant Baker mentioned that I was in Heather's position for 6 years. So I have a lot of experience in dealing with schools in Marin County. And it is true that it hasn't always been a positive experience. I really want to say from the get-go, Ms. Russell, Ms. Kaufman, honestly, it's the best experience I've had working with the school, working together, being fair, and even to follow up now that the case criminally is closed, that I've been asked, are we still going to be taking information? And it's absolutely, like I said to Ms. Kaufman, that any victim that wants to be heard is going to be heard. And I think we're going to get to this, but I kind of want to interject this to make this really important, that if you're not familiar with what sexual abuse is and the percentage of people that are actually victim of sexual abuse, it's surprisingly high. And what's more surprisingly high is the amount of people that have been sexually abused as a child that never tell. It's huge. It's tough. So any child that is brave enough to tell, people like Heather and I and Hugh and Dr. Grogan, we all work as a team to support these children. And our job does not end if there's no criminal prosecution. It's what's unique about our job is that we're going to stay on as long as the family and the child wants us to. Because most cops don't want to do this job. We're in this job because we genuinely care about children and giving them a voice, because most of them never tell, is a very honorable thing to do. And I just want to make sure that you guys know that our job does not end just because of what has happened in this case, and that we will continue to listen and support any children, no matter what they have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you let parents know if this happened at school? The newspaper article implied that it did.
I may have already answered that, but I'm not sure if the question is asking, can we let them know initially or at this point? I think at this point, jurisdictionally, that was the source of our investigation. That was the location and source of the investigation. So the answer to that is yes. And we could have put that out earlier, but we choose to hold back details. In every criminal investigation, we choose to hold back certain details from the press and the public. In the event that we have an interview with a suspect, there may be certain details that they would only know. And so we hold those things back. It's not to mislead the public in any way. It's to make sure that we're properly verifying information that we receive and evidence that we collect.
I think that's helpful clarification. Will there be an investigation into why this wasn't discovered earlier?
Again, I would defer that to staff. There's no criminal nexus to that, so that would not be investigated by us.
Given that the suspect is deceased and the case will be closed, does that mean that families will never receive any additional specifics about the allegations?
We're not barred from discussing the details of the case with and I use this term here because it's in the law, with the victims. We can have those conversations with the victims, their parents, their representatives, if they were represented by counsel, for example. We could have those conversations with them. With the general public, the answer would be no.
Thank you. And I want to appreciate that some of these might be repetitive. Sometimes people join at different times, and I thank you very much for reiterating some of the previous information. Can you share enough details of the evidence to inform what improvements to school and district protocols to improve the safety, or can be made to improve the safety at school sites and classrooms?
So with regard to our collaborative effort with the district staff, school staff, administration, we can discuss enough specificity, and they're aware of many of these details, most of them already. So we can have conversations with them to the extent that that's fruitful and beneficial for their improvement and our improvement. We can have those conversations. We just can't do it in a public forum, but we can professionally have those conversations.
Did the allegations involve more than one child?
I'm going to answer that as a yes or no question, and I will say yes.
Thank you. What happens if a kid comes forward after criminal investigation concludes? Will they not have a report that may aid in a civil investigation?
So I'm going to take that in kind of two pieces. So the first piece is, if they come forward and they want to make a disclosure to us, we are committed to providing it. I think Sergeant Dargo addressed that. It's very important for us to provide that forum for them. And we will document it appropriately in the same way we would as if the case were not closed. The availability of that information down the road in any other kind of court proceeding is not my area of expertise. I'm not a documents expert. So I would defer to legal counsel on that question, on the second part of it.
Will any information ever be disclosed? It would seem there is a way to do this in a way to preserve privacy and provide the community with information.
From a legal standpoint, we are bound by the laws of confidentiality where juveniles, minors are involved. So we would not be making public disclosure of details. Again, if there's a forum outside of us discussing it publicly or releasing reports we're not legally able to release, is there another forum where these things might ultimately come out? It's possible, but again, I would defer to civil counsel on that.
I think this question refers to your initial comment. If the suspect's name has been reported in the press, in the public domain, why wouldn't the sheriff's department be allowed to use it?
I'm not saying that we couldn't indicate that we had a press release where we identified the suspect. I'm just not using it in this forum because we were asked to avoid personal identities.
What does probable cause mean when making an arrest?
So probable cause is a legal standard that means more likely than not. So preponderance of the evidence. It is more than a reasonable suspicion, but less than proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So it lies in the middle, and it is the standard of evidence that authorizes a peace officer to make an arrest.
What is the time period of alleged abuse on campus?
I will have to defer that to one of the detectives. I think we can answer it in time frame, but not specific dates, if that makes sense.
Can you repeat the question?
What is the time period of alleged abuse on campus?
So the allegation was reported to us in March, and just a general timeline would have been some sort of indication in January.
Okay, so that answers this follow-up question. Are you able to disclose the year? I guess that wasn't the year or time frame of the earliest allegation. I think it was what you said.
This current January.
This current January. Got it. Okay. Does the sheriff's department or investigators ever give any input on whether or not a suspect should be let out on bail? Who assesses the risk of a bail release?
So the first part of that question is no, and you would not want us involved in that decision. That's a decision for judges. The judges set a presumptive bail for for the most common violations in the penal code and other criminal codes. And then there's a fixed bail for unspecified crimes that are not specified by the judges. So we don't partake in that or participate in that. The presumptive bail in this case was $200,000. And again, that is set by the Marin Judicial Council. And that is the amount that they found to be appropriate. Now, at arraignment, there is an opportunity for both the prosecutor, the district attorney's office, to argue for an increased bail or no bail if they find that to be appropriate. There's also an opportunity for defense counsel to argue for reduced bail for mitigating circumstances for reduced bail, but we're not involved in that process.
And this relates to something you just said. Did he have an arraignment date scheduled?
Yes.
Okay. Can you help us understand if what transpires was discovered at school, involved one child, then the investigation uncovered that there were more?
I would defer that question to probably Sergeant Dargo, who was there the first day. I don't know if there were one or more that came forward at the same time.
And I can answer that. Initially, there's what came on the radar, and from there, other information was discovered. I mean, it's a very vague answer, but that's what happened.
And a related question, did this happen during school hours?
You can answer.
Yes. And we should probably clarify, I know we're referring to other people coming forward as well. I know that Detective White is answering her question in relation to the case that was brought forward through the courts in relation to time-wise.
And for clarification, I just want to make sure we don't solicit or elicit disclosures. We receive them when they come to us. They're sometimes they come by way of a mandated reporter, which can be any variety of a medical professional, a teacher, a firefighter, a police officer. They come in a lot of different, there are a lot of different categories of that. But when it's referred to us, we reach out, but we don't solicit or elicit disclosures, and we don't force anybody to make a disclosure.
What is your confidence level that you've identified all victims?
I would say not high at this point, because as Sergeant Dargo alluded to, the overwhelming majority of victims, survivors, don't disclose. So I don't know that I could go to bed at night and honestly saying to you that, we're relatively certain that we know we've gotten all of the disclosures. I'm relatively certain that we haven't, and that we likely never will.
I want to ask this question. I'm probably going to ask it again, but I think it's great to ask this to this panel as well. In your experience, what can community members do to support the school and affected families through this very difficult time?
And I'll defer to that as well, as you have more experience in there.
Listen, believe. Listen, believe. That's the biggest thing I can say. And I know people I think it's our human nature to want to know every gory detail, everything. You just need to know that something wrong happened and a child was abused or alleged to have been abused. And think about, if that was your child, what privacy you would want. How much protection would you want from your community, from your law enforcement agency, from your school, to fight fiercely to preserve your privacy while your child is figuring out how to navigate and heal?
I would add to that and say that, and these times are tough for everyone involved, especially a community that wants answers. But just respect the privacy of those involved, because, it's not over for them. They still have a journey of healing. And that's something that we're still involved in. And that, starts with our very first contact. But just respecting the privacy of all involved in this case, I think, is extremely important for the community to understand that there's a lot of questions that people want answered, and understanding that those will probably not be answered is something that's important.
This is the very last one for this panel. The answer on the time frame is a clarification question. The answer on the time frame was unclear. Are you saying more than one child was allegedly a victim beginning no earlier than January 2024 and ending March of 2024?
During the investigation, it was indicated that there were instances that occurred in January of 2024.
And to our knowledge, not beyond March, right?
Correct.
And nothing prior to that.
Correct.
In the initial investigation.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much. The rest are going to staff.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you guys and girls very much. I think the sensitivity with which they've addressed this situation and the collaboration, as they indicated, has made it possible for us to see this through and to have you see the arrest that came forward. It's not always the case. So, and I can tell you've been doing this almost 20 years. So not always the case that even school staff are believed. So please know that. We are going to invite our attorney, Jaspreet Lokab, through. I know there were a number of questions surfaced for the district. I want to be clear that we're not going to answer those questions at this point, because as you can tell, the investigation is coming to the district. And while the victims, survivors will be continuing to report to the Sheriff's Department, we will also be aware and involved in that investigation as it pertains to how we move forward as a district and the work we do. And really, most importantly, is the maintaining of the privacy of the juvenile witnesses who will come forward. So again, we will not be answering those questions in any depth, but I will hand it over to Jaspreet right now.
Thank you, Dr. Kaufman. Can everyone hear me okay? Can everyone hear me?
Jaspreet, can you say something?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. And
Oh.
participating remotely as we decided to engage her at about 2 o'clock today.
Thank you, Dr. Kaufman. Good evening, everyone. As Dr. Kaufman mentioned, my name is Jaspreet Lokap-Dogra, and I am the legal counsel for the Mill Valley School District. I'm here today to explain the district's procedural next steps as it pertains to this matter. First and foremost, the district will be conducting an impartial and comprehensive investigation into this matter in accordance with relevant laws, district board policies, and also district administrative regulations. To that end, the district will be engaging a third-party neutral investigator who has the expertise for these types of investigations and also the relevant forensic background to conduct these investigations. This neutral party investigator will be conducting interviews with witnesses. They'll be reviewing pertinent evidence and also analyzing all of these issues objectively. This independent investigator will also ensure transparency and fairness throughout the investigation process. Given the breadth and scope of the investigation, the district cannot provide an estimated completion date at this time, but will assure you that the district will investigate both thoroughly and comprehensively. Based on the findings of the investigation, the district will then review both school-wide and site-level policies and procedures and formulate next steps. While the district's investigation is confidential, we also understand the importance of transparency, and to that end, the district will provide updates when appropriate and permissible in accordance with relevant legal considerations. I would like to take a moment to emphasize, as the Sheriff's Office and Dr. Kaufman has been up until now, that the district will be conducting its investigation with the utmost confidentiality and respect for privacy. So this means that the details and outcomes will be handled with care, and decisions about information sharing will strictly adhere to applicable laws and policies. However, I will also note that the district aims to maintain open lines of communication with its students, parents, and also its wider community. So to the extent that anyone has any questions, concerns, or statements, we really recommend that they reach out through the appropriate channels that I believe will be discussed later in the presentation and that are also currently publicized on the district's website. On that same note, the district does recognize that some individuals connected to this matter may include prior district students or graduates. So to that end, in its investigation, the district will be proactively reaching out to provide support, including offering opportunities for interviews and any necessary assistance to these individuals. I understand that there are many questions regarding the specifics of the district's investigation. As stated earlier, the district will provide updates when appropriate and permissible. As of now, the district is in the process of moving forward with an investigation, and so what is disclosable at this point is very much limited to what the Sheriff's Office has already provided. I will say, though, that the district's goal, first and foremost, is to ensure accountability and to learn from this experience, and also to continue to foster a safe and supportive learning environment and teaching environment within the district. And that is all I can say right now at this moment. So Dr. Kaufman, I will turn it back to you.
Thank you, Jaspreet. I think just want to capture a few things. One is that, you know, it feels very bureaucratic to say we're going to review our policies and training programs. In fact, we have policies and training programs in place already, and they didn't prevent this. So, you know, mandated reporter training, Department of Justice screening, annual 6 hours of training to make sure we're following safety protocols that keep our children protected and safe. None of those prevented this. And so I think it's a much deeper look as to what can we do differently in terms of our culture. And again, I was pretty vehement about it last time, probably beyond the scope. But to me, the integrity of the investigation is the absolute most important thing to me right now. I absolutely need to know that children who aren't getting heard get heard. Once we go through that process and timeline, and I get the opportunity to reach out to Tam High School, I get the opportunity to message the community at large of potential impacts and inputs. That 11-year employee who was primarily placed at Strawberry, but was definitely instructing students across our district and band. Once I have that opportunity to make sure that everybody's voice has been invited, and we get the opportunity to complete our investigation and identify the appropriate means of support for those individuals, we will share what we can and improve what we can. I do want to share just one quick anecdote, which is one of those conundrums, right? We know from the research on active shooting that you keep your classroom doors locked, that you create single points of ingress and egress on your campuses, and that you block your windows. You need to be able to close your windows and hide your kids. In such situations, other things can happen. And that's very, very unfortunate. And so we're now in a situation where we're reviewing those very same policies that we believe can keep our children alive and safe every single day, that make it possible for teachers to show up here and have the courage in today's world to educate your kids when we don't know what's going to happen next, has now ended up in a situation where we are questioning everything we do. And please know that I want to protect your children in all situations. And sometimes the opportunities to save lives are competing. And that is an unfortunate truth right now in our world. We shouldn't have to have these conversations about how safe your children are when you leave us, when they come to school, but we do. And as a mom, I get it. I've been a working mom and I've had nannies take care of my children the entire time. And I know what it's like to leave your children in someone else's hands and hope they're okay. And we will figure out how to do better. I don't know yet how, because we followed all the protocols and safety protocols and everything else. And it was the children who came and spoke. And that troubles me deeply, that it had to be our children who spoke. So trust me, we will look at this with excruciating detail. But first, we will make sure that all of the children whose voices need to be heard are heard. Next slide, please. So I wanted to take a moment to introduce Michael Grogan and Kathy Laughlin. They will be here to share some information with you about, and will be a repeat for those of you who were here last time, about the kinds of recommended questions and when and how to engage your children in asking questions about sensitive topics. And then we'll give an opportunity for parent questions and answers. Again, I want to give the caveat that probably won't be a lot of answers that people want to hear or in a lot of detail. And I'm also giving the caveat that the way their presentation is structured will cover what you need to be asking your children. So I will hand it over to them, and I definitely will not sit in the middle or anywhere near them while we have this conversation.
You want us to introduce ourselves or? It's okay, kiddo. My name is Michael Grogan. I'm a psychologist. I currently run the Jeanette Pranny Children's Center, which I work in very close contact with all the police departments in Marin County. We've opened the center in April of 2000, and we've interviewed 1,358 children over the course of that time. Prior to that, I was the clinical director of the Child Sexual Abuse Treatment Program for 16 years, and we saw many, many, many children. So that's who I am.
I'm Kathy Lachlan. Yeah. And I'm a therapist that works for Jeanette Pranny Children's Center. I was there many years ago working for the Child Sexual Abuse Treatment Program, and then left for a bit, was a school counselor, and now I'm back with Jeanette Pranny Children's Center. Years ago, worked and did a prevention program called the Touch Safety Program, where I went to schools and presented different kinds of what kids can do around touch safety. And so a lot of what in answering your questions can be how do we talk to our kids about this topic? And I also, I said this on Thursday, is I have a lot of hope when kids are the ones who are disclosing and talking about this, and they do get the resources that they need. They can, when a kid comes into the center and is interviewed, and we find that something's happened to them, we have therapists on site that will see the kids, and it's great. So that's what my job is. And I see a lot of kids ranging in age from 4 years old through 18. So.
You both came prepared to talk about recommended questions and when to engage your children. That's the
time. It's a very, very complicated thing for a parent to interview their child. So historically, in our circumstance, when we work with the police, if a child reports something to a parent, then we ask them not to ask any more questions, based on the fact that it becomes a criminal investigation at that point. So if somebody asks a lot of questions of a child, then the basis on which you ask them, which is out of love and compassion, may in some ways greatly affect the criminal process. That may not be the case in this circumstance, but I just want to warn you about that the sheriff's office has agreed to do it, has agreed to interview your children. So it's a kind of a fine line about where we go from with this, but there is a time that we need to think about stopping asking them questions, okay? So Kathy and I came up with a way to address it in a way to ascertain what may have happened to your child. This is not a complete form, and there may be other ways that we can help you address that, but I'll give you an example of what we came up with. So my understanding is probably the kids are talking about this at school, okay? So it's out. In some ways, that's good because it's being exposed to the children. And that may actually bring other children forward. It may also bring kids not forward. They don't want to talk about this. This is not an easy thing to talk about. It's very embarrassing. There's a lot of shame, as you would expect, related to this issue. So if a child did have an experience, is our experience in doing this work, they often are reluctant to talk in detail about it. But this is how we put together what may happen for you to address it, because you should check in with your children. It's a matter of how far you go. So this is what we came up with. I heard that kids are talking about a teacher at school. Tell me what you're hearing from them. So we're asking a very vague but yet clear, because we have the subject matter, which is a really positive thing, because we don't have to start asking them about specifics. How did you feel about hearing that? Again, you're opening up in a broad way about something that happened without asking any specifics at this point, hoping that they will come forward. When we do our interviews at the center, the two people that were on the right were all forensic interviewers. We go through a process of connecting with them. We ask them about what they like to do, what don't they like to do. And then the last question we ask them is, tell me about your last birthday. And the reason we ask them that is because they need to understand that this is a narrative that they have to produce. That way, it's going to be more accurate. So if you start asking direct questions, it may either drive them away or they may think they did something wrong. So if you can remain kind of non-direct and have them understand, I mean, you already have a relationship with these children, so that's a real positive. They may think they did something wrong and they're going to get in trouble. So that you could say that to them. You're not going to get in any trouble for anything that happened. So just to let you know what the forensic interviewers do, and to mimic some of that in a way to try to get the information from them without asking direct questions if you can. What was it like for you in his class? So you're moving now into, we know who the person is. So you're asking questions that are more specific, and that is another opening, more direct opening to, okay, you told me about what the kids are talking about. Now I'm going to ask you about what happened, if something happened to you in a respectful and non-direct way. Do you have any questions for me about this? If they say something, yeah, I like going to the class and he was a nice guy. And it's again, trying to hit very different ways of addressing something that they may come forward with, but it's unfortunate that you're going to have to rely on them. Okay. So then they say nothing at that point. Oh, I like being in the class. Yeah, he was a nice guy, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Is there anything else you want to tell me about that? What was it like to be there? It was fun. It was, I like being there. That's it. Okay. If other questions come up about this that you think about later, come back and talk to me. Come back and talk to me about them and let me know what you remember or what you think. Okay? If you come back to me and you have a question and I can't answer it, I know people that know a lot more about this than I do, and we can find out what they think to solve this. Okay, does that help? The other thing is you can go back and talk about it again. So it was just, I was thinking about the conversation we had last week, and I was asking you about the teacher that we know something happened, right? Did you remember anything else? So you're revisiting it in a way that you're letting them know that this is on your mind and you care about them. You can even say you did nothing wrong. Do you know what I mean? But you're opening it up again to keep the comments and understanding that you're available to them on a consistent basis. Does that make sense?
I was just going to add that that's very specific to this situation. So there are times that you're going to want to talk about this with your kids outside of this specific situation. So like talking to them about them being in charge of their bodies and their boundaries. And we gave a list of resources to the school. So there are some great books out there just to even sit down and read it with your child, because then it kind of can bring up different kinds of touch and things that they like and that they don't like. We really encourage parents not to coerce kids or kind of force kids like, oh, so-and-so's here, go give them a hug or a kiss, and to like really listen to your kids around what's comfortable for them in those situations. It's really hard for kids to say no when everyone's saying, there's even a family member if coming up and trying to give them a hug. And if kids can learn that they can say no to a family member, then that gives them the opportunity to know that they can say that to other people in their lives. So it's a really important piece. I would avoid using good and bad touch because, as you can imagine, a lot of times the touch isn't necessarily like kids. It's so confusing for kids that it's not necessarily clearly like someone hit them. And that, wow, that hurt. I talked about it in the last meeting, but if you can get kids to kind of identify a feeling, and we used to use the word, uh-oh feeling, like when you get that uh-oh feeling in your stomach that this doesn't feel right, then that's a time that you can come talk to me about anything that's going on. Trying to think of other things. Oh, something I didn't mention last time and I really wanted to mention is that it's really important for kids to have a few other people besides you that they can talk to. So it's kind of something you can do at home, is to say, okay, if I'm not here, is there another adult that you're comfortable, that we can identify that you could go talk to? A big thing for kids, young kids, is they sometimes feel they did disclose something to an adult and that adult didn't do anything to help them. So to identify a couple different people that kids can go talk to. It's usually pretty fun. Do you have that person's phone number? Should we let them know that they're one of the people that you would go to if you ever needed to talk to somebody, just to give them that idea that they have other people in case you're not there, or something's, they want to protect their parents sometimes. So it's nice for them to have some other people that they can talk to. It might be someone at school, a counselor, or something like that as well. I would also, when Michael was talking about this is obviously it brings up a lot of feelings for all of us. If there's any part of approaching your kid that you're feeling uncomfortable about or nervous about, I would practice with a partner, with a friend, with somebody else to kind of make it a little easier for you, because this is charged and it brings up a lot for us. And if you're uncomfortable or this is upsetting for you, that your child likely will pick up on your feelings about that. So to try to keep approaching it and when you can do it. And don't feel bad if it's like you need some practice, because we all need practice in situations like this. And that sometimes it might be this person's a little bit better at this than I am. And so maybe your partner does it or another friend does it or something like that, because it's okay that you want to make sure your kids feel safe and comfortable talking about it.
Some of the complications of this issue is that the kids are usually bonded to the person that's doing it. So it complicates it in terms of they have some loyalty to that person, and even though they may have endured some type of touching that was uncomfortable, there's a way that I'm not sure what, in certain circumstances, people would often say, this is a secret for you, between you and me, I'm not sure what happened in this case, but that's sometimes what occurs. The reason they may not tell a parent is because they feel shame and they should have stopped it, or something should have happened. And so there may be what Kathy suggested about other people would be a good idea, just to. They're ready. Oh, you're ready for questions? Okay. I'll stop.
And these questions are also helpful to reiterate a lot of the great information that we heard and just hammer home these great points you've made. So 2 I'm going to ask together because they're very similar. As a parent, what are some of the right questions to ask a child to try to discern if they are actually survivors? And the second one that's very similar, I don't know if my kid is a survivor or not. How can I support my kids if the school and the police won't release specific information about what happened?
Well, I think we went through how we do the scenario. In terms of, sometimes the child just simply has to come to the point that they're ready to tell you. You know, we have kids come all the time and we know what happened, or we have a really good idea what happened, but they can't tell us. They're just not ready. You can continue to remind them that, that something happened at school or whatever, and that they would be in no trouble if they told you that they didn't do anything wrong and you're concerned. Sometimes kids have difficulty talking about this, but I want you to know that I know other people that have been through this as children, and that if that happened to you, I want to just make sure we can do everything we can for you. I guess that would be how I'd respond to that question.
I just want to add that I would also look for natural times where you can talk about this with your kids, like using it as another safety. Like, we make kids put on their seatbelts, we make them wear bike helmets, all these different things, and that touch safety is another one of those ways that we're going to talk about how to make sure you stay safe. And then using some of those resources. I really highly recommend books. I don't know the ages of all the kids or the people asking the questions, but there are so many good books out there to kind of help with that. And then at the back of a lot of these books, there's like a resource guide for parents to say, to even go dig a little deeper if you wanted to. So I would encourage those to use those as well.
I was looking today, I brought 3 books over the weekend, but we have a party on Wednesday for 60 people. So I'm kind of working on that. But I was looking at the website that we had for the last 25 years, but I totally redid it about 4 years ago. And the way I started it again was talking about resources for parents and ways that you could see that something's happening to a child. So it's just Brandy Center, just put Brandy Center. Is that what it is?
It's on their resource list.
Okay.
I gave that to them.
There are actual like cartoons of disclosures by children. I'm not sure they'd be appropriate for children, but if you look at them, you can get a sense. Is this too intense for a child to experience, to see? But that website will provide you some sense of clarity and education.
I think you just answered this, but I'm going to repeat it just for respect of the person that wrote it and ask a question related. I didn't hear you say. You've made it clear that most survivors never speak of their experience. How can we create the best chances for children feeling able to come forward? And maybe you can repeat something you said earlier about pointing out multiple people.
Yeah, I would. Yes, a lot of people don't come forward with disclosures. In this situation, the part about this that might be helpful is that kids have come forward. So might make it a little bit easier for some other kids to come forward, so that it's a topic that people are talking about right now. So it's already set up that way for you in a sense, rather than you having to bring this up kind of out of the blue. This is something specifically going on. And to use multiple times. Really, kids they're gonna at times be like, I don't feel like talking about this right now. And let them, don't force it, but let them go on their way. And then maybe there's another time that, they come and are helping you with dinner or something like that, and it can come up again. Oftentimes I find with kids, the less I'm making it like I'm going to be talking directly to you right now about this very serious topic, is like usually driving in the car when I'm not looking directly at the person, or taking a walk, walking the dog, doing things like that. Kids have a much easier way of talking freely when they're not feeling like, you're expecting something from them. So the easier, more natural times that it can come up, I think is, and I would just keep bringing it up, even when this particular time has passed. It's a topic that's great at different developmental levels. And on the website, there are different developmental books and ways of talking to kids about this. And again, we are a resource even after tonight. So if you have specific questions, feel free to reach out to one of us as well.
I just wanted to say that in some ways it was a blessing that this is out, because then everybody knows what's going on, which may bring kids forward. Most typical sexual abuse that we see is that it's, typically a family member and only one person knows about it and there's no discussion about it. So it's a giant secret that that child is obligated to keep or feels obligated to keep. So there is an opportunity here because it's so widely known that they will be talking about it. Now, they may not tell their friends or anything like that, but that you have a link to something that has happened to other children. The other thing is, I like what Kathy said about, I was going to tell you to try talking about it at bedtime. You know what I mean? I would just go in there, if you're not doing it now, and go in and talk to them about other things. And then when you're ready, introduce it when you're tucking them in or whatever you're doing. The other thing is the car is a great place to talk to them because they may have difficulty with eye contact. You looking at them. But just always reassuring them that anything that happened to them, you would really be interested in hearing and to help them.
How can we handle the questions from our kids if this person is a bad guy or a good guy? They have so many great memories with him, but also know what he did.
It's always a complication. There's usually a balance between the bad and the good. That's what makes them connected to them. So I'm not really sure how to answer that in terms of that. When you're talking to them and they say, no, nothing happened. Do you know what I mean? I mean, if you get to that point, you keep asking me these questions. Okay, I'm just concerned about you. If you remember anything, please tell me because I want to help you. Something like that, where you're reiterating your role as a parent is to take care of them and that they can come to you and talk. And as Kathy alluded to, if they have an older brother or sister or something like that, that might be easier to talk to them if you feel comfortable with that. But providing them other options to talk to other people may not be a bad idea because they feel that when you find out they did something wrong and you're going to be angry at them, even though you're not doing that at all. But they recognize that may be a consequence.
I also want to say that is the most complicated part about this crime is that oftentimes they do have, care about the perpetrator and things like that. So the way, I listen to both, as a therapist, I hold both those things that you can hold that it's a hard thing for kids to understand. Yeah, I mean, it's a hard thing for adults to understand where you can, feel two things at once. You could have had a lot of good times with this person and they did something that was wrong and not okay. And sitting with kids in that ambivalence and that confusion is really hard, but it's really important for them to have both those feelings and to not just make him the bad guy, because that's a really hard thing for kids to hold. So allowing them to even have, you might not feel very many positive feelings about this person, but they might. And so to be okay to hear what those might be as well, knowing that he did something wrong, as to hold both those things. It's a tough one.
The other part of this is that they know something bad happened to this guy. So they may feel some sense of responsibility that, especially if they come out and tell, there may be a sense of responsibility. And so that becomes complicated for them.
So we have two important questions for you and then a follow-up about how to contact you. The first one is, if a friend at school tells your kid about something specific, what should we tell our kids to do to support their friends and encourage them to tell an adult?
Boy.
That's a great question. I would tell my kids that if one of your friends comes and tells you something, that you can say, I will go with you to talk to, whether, I don't know who is going to be on campus. Erin probably can answer some of those.
Psych principal.
Yeah.
Our counselors and school psychologists, many of them are here tonight, are super well versed in having these conversations with students. So that would probably be in the first place to go.
And I think in offering to go with your friend is a really nice way to do it. If your friend doesn't want to do that, your child will still need the support just having gotten that information. So I always encourage your kids to use their resources. So it's great if they come home and they tell you, well, my friend just told me this. I didn't know what to do. And then you can, I'm so glad you told me, and then, take the necessary steps. But it oftentimes, that is how things get disclosed, is kids go to their friends. And if, because it's being talked about, it's a nice way as a school counselor, like a friend bringing a friend, so they don't have to go do it by themselves. It works.
I guess the only addendum I'd have to that is, if your child comes home and says that, Susie had this happen to her and she's told me, but I have to keep it a secret, is I would say, can you tell Susie that it's really important for her to talk to an adult? And then from there, if he's telling his mom or she's telling her mom, then what we've had other people do is simply call the mom. The mom called the mom and say, listen, Sarah came home and said that something happened to Susie and I wanted you to know about it. And then we go from there, and then it's reported, and that's the way to handle that. That's the way we've handled it. It's going to be a little different because they're going to take over now, but in our role connected to the police, that's how typically that's handled.
So that answer is actually something that was here, and I just want to make sure that I'm hearing you correctly. This says, if a child shares something with a friend that a friend told them that is of concern, what would you recommend that we do? Should we tell the parent directly?
I mean, that would be my suggestion. An adult needs that, especially the mother or father of that child needs to know, because they'll take the appropriate action. So that would be my suggestion, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to have you answer that directly. Thank you. The last question before the how do we reach you is, now that rumors are swirling around on the playgrounds, if more children come forward, how can you tell truth from fiction or rumor?
I think the stats show that somewhere about 92% of children that come forward with this information, it's accurate. That there used to be distortions, and this is a hard thing to believe happens. So you don't want to believe this. And so if there's any way that you can hold on to, it's misunderstood. So, but it is, if a child, first of all, as we talked about, kids have a tough time talking about this. But if they come forward with this, then more than likely it will be accurate. But that will then go through a process to determine what the professionals or the people that have a lot of experience in this can in some ways in fact justify that, yes, this seems to be accurate.
Just apologies to Anonymous at 6:54 p.m. This one got lost in the district related ones. My child is 6 and doesn't yet know what happened. Should I tell her? I'm worried another child will tell her.
You want to answer it? You want me to answer it?
Sure.
Yeah, you should tell him. I don't think you need to tell him everything, but you need to say something like, there's some things happening at school about we know who. And I just wondered if you know or have talked to any other kids about what the concern was about this specific person. And I guess I'd leave it there. And my sense is that I would just check back in. You know, you're going back and checking in, but I just want you to know if you hear more about that and you have questions, feel free to come and talk to me. This is important that we know about this and we can deal with this to make sure you're okay.
And I'm sorry, this just came in, but I think it might be helpful for you to address. How do we deal with the ambiguity of some of these rules? It's not okay if your music teacher touches you, your back, but it's okay if your gymnastics teachers do.
Touch you?
Sorry?
Did you say touch?
It says, how do we deal with the ambiguity of these rules? It's not okay if your music teacher touches your back, but it's okay if your gymnastics
Oh,
teacher.
I see what you mean. Okay. That's a good one. I don't know.
Well,
go ahead.
I think this goes back to talking about this more frequently than just when you're dealing with a situation that is happening right now, because I think that that's the case in every single person they're going to meet. That's going to be sometimes okay for, you know, that goes to consent. And as they get older and you start to talk about consent, because you know, the kids are, as they get older, they may not want their gymnastic teacher to touch them either, or it may bring up stuff. So it's kind of teaching them ways to be aware of their body safety and what you know, the feelings that they have at different times, and to trust their gut, and to be able to say this is not okay, or if they're confused about something, that you as their parent bring it to me. Let's talk about this, you know, to make yourself as approachable as you can as a parent, especially dealing with topics like this. If you're really busy and you don't have the time to like really sit down with them and go through this all, because I know kids can talk forever sometimes. And it's important to like know that if this is not the right time for you to be able to say, you are bringing up some really important things right now. I need to finish what I'm doing. So, and then let's talk about this some more. And don't forget to go back and bring it back up, because as soon, if you're like working or, you know, your phone's going off and you're like, oh, I really need to get that, your kid will pick up on that as well. But I think that's to answer that is, let's keep talking about it. And even in the touch safety program we used to do with parents is like to come up with different what if scenarios. What if you were, you know, like even something like that? What if your gymnastic teacher, you know, was helping you do something on the bars and, you know, touched you, you know, is that okay? Or, you know, how that might happen. But you can come up with different what if scenarios and see how they would respond and kind of help them come up with things. The more kids have knowledge about stuff, the more power they have to decide what is right for them and the feelings that they have. So again, don't be afraid to talk about these topics, because they're out there, and there won't be as charged for kids if you practice some of those different scenarios.
I think the other thing is you decide who touches your body, even your gymnastic teacher. So if you're uncomfortable with that, just tell me. You decide if you want to be touched in that manner. And so if that happens and you're uncomfortable or don't like that, then come talk to me and we'll talk to that person. I think infusing them with a sense of they decide is a really good thing. I mean, I would start saying that to them now based upon what's going on, you know, and you're educating them, and then that may trigger something and we may get more information.
Thank you for this valuable research, insight. How do we reach you is the final question.
by telephone.
We,
Um,
we can give.
we,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
We are all, we have a couple of different addresses, but it's all through BACR, Bay Area Community Resources. So mine's mgrogan@bacr.org. You can call us. We're in the phone book, Jeanette Brandy Children's Center, 415-473-3750.
Thank you so much.
And we'll
Thank-
hang around at the end if you want to ask questions.
Thank you both so much for this and for all you do. It's super important and very timely. Just a couple of other slides we've got left. As you know, the sheriff's office will continue to make themselves available to do interviews. What we're currently doing is having the site principals. Seems to be, you can tell anyone. I mean, in all honesty, you don't need to go through a specific channel as long as you tell someone who's employed by the school district. We are currently finding that most families will be sending an email saying, I have a concern, or here's information I heard. Could you please check it out? And so that email going to the school principal has been our most effective vehicle for forwarding that information to Sergeant Dargo, and also for making sure that we are tracking as this investigation progresses. We'll have that dual role where our district council will be involved in the formal investigation, hopefully side by side with the sheriff's department, but that's something we need to still figure out in terms of how and when the transition occurs, if it occurs, in terms of interviewing. And then again, we mentioned that, really we're hiring a third party investigator. I think that it's the only way I can do this in good faith. I want, the lid lifted, the hood looked at, the trunk, the engine examined. Like, I really want to make sure that anybody who wants to be heard, whether they're a current student or former student, has the opportunity to come forward and speak. I'm in contact with Tara. I'm actually, we've had a lot of support. Tara Topiat from the high school district had a lot of support from the Marin County Office of Education as well. And, we know this isn't a, 30, 60, 90-day process. As you've heard, children disclose when they disclose, and it's up to us to make the safe environment to do that and to maintain those opportunities and points of contact. My phone number, personal cell, is available to all of you. It has been at all times since I've been employed here. And if you feel like you're not getting heard for any reason in this district, you can contact me, and I can assure you I will follow through. Next slide. These are some resources for parents. We did order, I think what we're going to do at the elementary level is get about 20 sets of each of these books that we'll prioritize them, but make them available in a parent lending library or something so that you have the ability to get them and access them for your own children. We also have a list of recommended resources, talking points at our website. And then importantly, also Care Solace is really an agency that can help you work within this framework of your own insurance company to access providers, because I think for all of us who are trying to support our families, our insurance limitations don't always help us find a provider when we want one. And so again, this is an opportunity to look for resources. And again, for anybody who has concerns about their child or there's a reporting, we work that through the sheriff's department in our district and try to find access to the Jeanette Brandy Center as soon as we can. And, again, further updates will be provided as legally allowed through Parent Square, through websites. I'm not quite sure what other, as we conclude the investigation or conduct it, we will know what other supports and needs are in place. Right now, we are very limited in our knowledge and understanding of what specifically happened, because we did hand all of our investigations over to the sheriff's department. So we are learning and working alongside the sheriff's department. And I think that's it. Again, I want to thank you. I also want us to be mindful. and that there are community members who are really struggling with this dual perception. And I'm trying to focus on the issues and the facts and take the people out of it, which is not me trying to silence people in any stretch of the imagination, but to recognize that we're a community and that our only way through this is together. And that means that we're going to have to hold two truths at the same time, because there are people who are feeling very, very, very hurt on all aspects of this continuum of suffering and pain right now. So it's our obligation as a district to hold the space for children to feel safe. And my priority is that they can hold everything they need to hold and still come forward. So thank you for coming. And I am sure we will have similar forums. I'm not quite sure when or how, but they will happen. So thank you for this evening, and be safe heading home. Parents to follow up the district in terms of, oh, council, well, for sure, but parents should follow up with the principal and directly engage families. The principals will deploy support as needed.
Thank you. And maybe we can just send that.